When you're building something complex, whether it's a bridge or a brand new app, you can't just wing it, right? You need a plan, a blueprint. Well, today, we're going to look at the original blueprint for building software, an approach that literally shaped the digital world we live in. Okay, so picture this. How do you build a skyscraper? You wouldn't just start laying bricks and hope for the best, would you? Of course not. You need a super detailed, super rigid plan. The foundation, the structure, the electrical, every single thing is mapped out before a single shovel ever hits the ground. And once you start building, you follow that plan to the letter, one step after another. Well, that exact same philosophy, that rigid, step-by-step approach, was the very first one applied to the digital world. And that foundational method for making software, we call it the Waterfall Model. So what exactly is it? Well, it was formally introduced way back in 1970 by a guy named Winston W. Royce. And the two words you really need to remember here are linear and sequential. Now, to get why this made sense, you gotta transport yourself back to the 70s. We're talking massive, expensive software projects running on computers that filled entire rooms. So they treated them like these huge engineering projects, and a strict plan just felt, well, safe, logical. The idea was simple. You finish one stage completely before you're even allowed to think about the next one, and there's no going back. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. How does this thing actually work? We're going to follow the flow of a project as it literally cascades from a simple idea all the way down to a finished product. And honestly, the name waterfall is the perfect metaphor. Just think about it. Progress only flows in one direction, down. You start at the very top and you cascade down through each and every phase until you hit the bottom. And yeah, just like a real waterfall, there's no swimming back up. So here they are, the 6 distinct phases we're going to walk through. It all kicks off with requirements, then flows into design, development, testing, deployment, and finishes with maintenance. Let's break each one of these down. First up, requirements. And this phase is the foundation for, well, everything. The entire goal here is to understand and document every single thing the customer wants the software to do. So if we're building, say, an online banking app, this is where we'd list out all the features like transferring funds or paying bills. The big deliverable here is a document, the Software Requirement Specification, or SRS. Think of it like the official contract for the project. Okay, so once those requirements are set in stone, we flow down to the next phase, design. This is where the team creates the actual technical blueprint. It's usually broken into two parts. You've got the high-level design. That's kind of the overall architecture, the big picture. And then you have the low-level design, which gets into all the nitty-gritty details of every little component, like how is the database structured, or what security protocols are we using. And after the design is locked down, we hit the development phase. This is where the magic happens, right? The coders take all those detailed design documents and start translating them into real working source code. And as they build each little piece, or module, they do something called unit testing to make sure every single part works perfectly all by itself. Now, once all those individual pieces are built, it's time to put them all together. Welcome to the testing phase. This is the very first time everything is integrated and running as one complete system, and the team really puts it through its paces. First, there's alpha testing, which is done internally. Then comes beta testing with a small group of friendly customers. And finally, the big one, acceptance testing, where the client themselves gives the final thumbs up. And after the software passes all those tests and gets that final approval, it's time for deployment. Yep, this is basically the launch party. The software is delivered and officially released to the customer or, unleashed on the public. But wait, it's not over yet. Not by a long shot. In fact, you could say the biggest part of the journey is just getting started. This is the maintenance phase. It's where the software is going to live for the rest of its life. This means fixing any bugs that pop up, adding new features the customer thinks of later, and just keeping it updated so it works on new computers or operating systems. And you really can't overstate how huge this last phase is. Get ready for this number. On a typical project, a whopping 60%, that's 60, of the entire project's effort is spent right here on maintenance. It is absolutely not an afterthought. It's the bulk of the whole shebang. Okay, so we've got this super structured, really rigid model. But what are the trade-offs? Let's dig into the good and the bad of sticking to such a strict plan. So on the plus side, it's simple. You can't deny that. The phases are super clear, the milestones are obvious, and it really forces good habits, like define before you design and design before you code. But the disadvantages are pretty major.
The model is incredibly rigid. What happens if a customer wants to change something halfway through? It's a huge problem. You get basically zero feedback until the very end. And finding a bug late in the process? Oh, that can be insanely expensive to fix.
And this really captures the core problem perfectly. The second that first requirements phase is locked in, trying to accommodate any change requests becomes a total nightmare for the developers. The plan is the plan, period. There's just very little room to pivot. So with all those big drawbacks, you're probably wondering, does anyone even use this anymore? I mean, is the waterfall model still relevant at all in today's fast-paced, constantly changing world? And the answer is yes. But, and this is a big but, only in very specific situations. Waterfall can still be the absolute best choice when the requirements are perfectly understood and, this is key, they are guaranteed not to change. Think about building software for something like a space shuttle or a medical device. These are safety-critical systems where every single detail has to be planned and documented with absolute precision. You just can't afford for things to go wrong. And this image really shows the crucial difference. On the left, you've got Waterfall's strict one-way street. But on the right, you see a modern software development lifecycle, or SDLC. And unlike Waterfall, these modern methods are built as a continuous loop, a cycle of feedback, iteration, and constant improvement. They are literally designed for change, not to resist it. Which brings us to a final thought to leave you with. While all of modern development is racing ahead in these fast-paced cycles, the old waterfall model is still there, reminding us about the power of a solid foundation and a really, really thorough plan. So here's the question. In a world that's built for change, is there still some wisdom to be found in a plan that was designed to never change?